Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Simon Brady. Simon is a certified financial planner and the founder and owner of Anglia Advisors, a personal finance and investment consulting service that focuses on helping individuals, couples, families, foreign nationals living and working in the United States that are young professionals between the ages of their early 20s and mid 40s. You can learn more about Simon and his firm by going to his website, www.angeliaadvisors.com, or by emailing him at simonangeliaadvisors.com. Hello, Simon. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Thank you for asking me. I appreciate it.
To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Simon Brady?
When I set up the company in 2016, what I wanted to do then was provide personal finance and investment guidance to a group of people that were not really served by the broad financial planning community that focuses on pre-retirees, retirees with millions of dollars, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to create a place where younger professionals, early 20s to mid 40s, could come for this advice, regardless of their net worth. So I guess success to me is if I am accomplishing that.
Essentially. And I think that's really important. You brought up a interesting but very true aspect that a lot of financial advisors don't really help until you are in a certain net worth or a certain point in your life. And a lot of it, too, is as young professionals or foreign nationals into this country, that conversation about having a financial planner does not necessarily come up as much till you're later in life. And I think that's, I'm a planner in general by habit. So I'm always like, let me have the information, let's plan. So in case something comes up, or even if something doesn't come up, now I know I'm set in what I'm doing for the long term. And I think a lot of younger professionals don't get that guidance. And that's why I'm specifically excited to have this conversation with you today, because I think a lot of people can have myths debunked about what they can be doing, things that they can be doing at any age, or ideas to just have in the back of their head about what can be done at any point. But I want to start off with an interesting but journey you went through. So as you might be able to tell by Simon's wonderful accent, he was born and raised in London and even got his education in the United Kingdom and France. What made you decide to come to the United States and practice here specifically?
At the beginning, it was relatively simple. I was working for a trading firm in London, and a position opened up in the New York office, and I was asked whether I wanted to go to New York for 2 years, which was, I don't know, 25 years ago now. So I jumped at that opportunity, went to New York, extended my stay by 1 year, by 2 years, by 3 years, started putting down some roots here. And before I knew it, it was 25 years later. That was when I was trading, sort of a Wall Street trading job, when I moved over to my own firm as I say, in 2016. And the designation that I had that allowed me to do that is really only valid in the United States. So, no, when I go back to London now, I feel like a visitor. So I think this is really where I am now.
For you, we've had this conversation even as you transition to living in America full time, there was a lot of things about financial planning and words and terms that you didn't even know, because in other parts of the world, it isn't something you necessarily have to think about or is talked about What, through your own experiences as being a foreign national to America and relocating here, did you go through in your financial planning that, helped you learn, helped you grow, but also that you didn't even know you would have to know about?
Oh, there's a lot. You know, 401k, what the hell is that? No one from outside the US understands that. What's an IRA? How do taxes work here? Why do I have to spend $500,000 on educating a child when, that's as good as free everywhere else? Why do I have to have thousands of dollars of health insurance? These are all things that people arriving in the country. And just to be clear, the foreign nationals are a small part of my business, an area I specialize on. It's not exclusively revolving around foreign nationals. But those people, when they come here, the other things they don't understand is the importance of credit in the US. That's not as pervasive in other countries as it is here. Having a good credit score is really quite important here. The estate planning laws, there's just a million things that there's no real person available to give this guidance to people. The immigration attorney is not going to tell you any of this stuff. Your HR department at your new job in the US is not going to tell you any of this stuff. So where are you going to learn it? You're probably going to learn it from the person you sit next to at work or from watching TV, which is, perhaps not the best way. So I decided to create a consultation whereby I haven't got all the answers, but I would say, here's what you're going to face in the upcoming months. You have to know what a 401k is. You have to know what an IRA is. You have to know. So that was, and that all came from personal experience. Yes, as you said.
And I think that's really important. As you said, sometimes we learn information, whether you're a young professional, a foreigner, a veteran in your industry, whatever that industry might be, by the people that you surround yourself with. And the hard part sometimes with that is they only know what they know, right? So through their own situations, they might not be a knowledge expert in the industry. So they might not give you the right answers, especially when it comes to 401k, IRAs, things like that most benefit you and your life goals and your trajectory of what you're trying to do. Now, for some of our young professionals who might be listening, and even some people who are a little older, IRAs are something that can be a new term for some people. And when you typically think of a retirement plan or something along those lines, 401ks get talked about all the time, right? Opt into your 401k and what people think is the best way to do that. But IRAs are so useful for some individuals who might be listening and not know what that is. Can you dive a little bit into what an IRA is and the importance of having an IRA?
Sure. An IRA is very separate from any retirement plan you may have at work. Your ability to contribute to an IRA depends on how much you earn, whether you have a retirement plan at work. There's a bunch of different rules, but generally, if you're eligible, you can choose one of two options. You can put up to $6,500 into this IRA, which is in your name, and $6,500 will be knocked off your taxable income that year. So you get a tax break on the way in. When you take the money out in retirement, that will be added back into your income then. But the theory is, of course, that you're in a lower tax bracket in retirement than you are in your working years. So you earn more on the front end than you pay on the back end. The other one is the Roth IRA, which is the mirror image of that, where you get no tax break from putting it in, but when you take it out in retirement, the earnings and everything on it is completely tax free. So it's a way to, during your working life, put money away one way or another that benefits you either now or then. I mean, it is restricted. It's, as I say, $6,500 per person. And if you start earning more than a certain amount, you become restricted on what you can contribute, although there's kind of workarounds to that. So yeah, it's a very useful financial product.
Simon, for you, I'm working a lot with individuals in their early 20s to mid 40s, what is something you encounter and see a lot with your clients that they might not have thought of previously or might not be aware of about financial planning themselves?
I find this all the time. Occasionally, you get the dream client who's 23 years old, has just graduated, just got his first job, and comes to me and says, I want to start planning. I mean, that's rare, but wonderful when it happens. We have 40 years of time to plan, and you can educate on 401ks, IRAs, etc. But mostly what happens is a typical client might be in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe settling down with somebody, maybe having a first child, maybe thinking about buying a place as opposed to renting it. And suddenly there's this avalanche of decisions that they have to make. They're changing jobs every 2 years. They're, like say, getting married, they're getting divorced, there's children. So suddenly from a carefree time in their mid 20s, when, a salary is just something to spend beer money on, they have to make these decisions. And it triggers so much. Having children triggers so much. Now you have to think about life insurance. What happens if you die? You have to think about guardianship. So there's estate planning considerations. You have to consider, as I mentioned before, the fact that in 18 years' time, you're going to have to lay out $500,000 for college. And you've got to start making those preparations then, and it impacts your real estate decisions. We're going to need a 2-bedroom, we need a 3-bedroom, we're going to have another kid. Where are we going to live? Is it a good school district? All this sort of stuff. And I find that in that kind of 28 to 33 age area, people can grow up pretty fast. And it's good. I think it's important for them to have professional guidance at that time.
What do you think? Yeah, and you said it right there. There's a lot of life events that can happen within a short amount of time that really make you reevaluate how you're doing, what you're doing, and your outlook on all of those things. And the importance level shifts on some of them
Yes.
as well. For you, what is something that a young professional might walk in your door and really is as green as could be on a topic that when they leave, they go, oh, wow, I got a totally different perspective on that. That you try to, whether they become a long term client or a short term client, really try to help them wrap their head around.
I think, I think if they are in that sort of, sub mid 30s age group, I think it's important to get across that they are to be encouraging. They have the time to do this. Time is the greatest weapon you have in financial planning and investment. And if you're coming to a professional in your late 20s, early 30s, you have that time. We have 35, 40 years to get things done. What you do with your money in your 20s is far more important than what you do with your money in your 50s. Because if you're doing, most people start sort of, putting money away and making financial in their 40s and 50s. And by then, you've only got 15, 20 years worth of, compounding and getting it together. If you're making those smart decisions in your 20s, that is what's going to impact your end balance in your retirement much more so than what decisions you make when you're 55. That's going to have very, very little impact. So I'm always very encouraging to these people if they do come to me and say, look, this is great. You've made this decision now. Yes, you might have a load of student loan debt, and you might be this reason and that reason why things might look a little bleak right now, but we've got so much time to fix it that, everything's going to be okay. So I think, to answer your question, to get across to them that, even if things do look a little bleak, that time is the strongest weapon that they have.
And I love how you bring up the fact that time can be, an ally in this environment. Um, we had another guest on, and the analogy they used is time is your runway. The earlier you start, the longer your runway is. And you never, you know, money can be such a hard topic sometimes to talk about and to think
Mhm.
about. So some individuals go, I'm going to put that off until next year. And the next year comes and it's like, okay, it's still uncomfortable. Let's put that off for another 6 months to a year. But the when you start out earlier and go, I'm going to take this step, I'm going to reach out to someone and understand these things, it gives you more knowledge, which gives you more power, which ends up creating an environment where it's not stressful. It doesn't have to be stressful. And you can take the time to really decide what will work best for your situation, which you help a lot of young professionals do. And what do you try to discuss when figuring out what is the right fit for certain plans for young professionals specifically? Because there's such, there's so much information out there that sometimes people come and go, this is what I need. And you're like, that is so far left of what you actually need. So
Yes.
how do you do that and and how should young professionals kind of direct themselves on what the right choices are for them?
Yes, you're exactly right. Time, just as time is a great friend to a 30-year-old, it's an absolute enemy to a 55-year-old that hasn't done anything yet. So I think, again, as I say, let's look at the situation right now. And there are certain things available that are kind of low-hanging fruit. Open that 401k. The government's giving you a tax break. Take it. Open the IRA. So there's certain almost givens that should be just taken up. I would say probably some of the misconceptions that people have at that age. The biggest one, and this is perhaps a New York thing, is this desperation to own real estate. I want to buy a place. If I'm paying rent, I'm paying my money away. If I get a mortgage, I'm paying myself back. All this nonsense. Real estate is historically it's not a particularly great investment. And I find people wanting to get on that ladder way, way, way too early before they can afford it, cleaning out their 401k to make a down payment on a one bedroom when they plan on having 3 kids. So, I mean, just people can get very, what's the word? Myopic, I guess, in terms of things like that, because it's been drilled into them by their parents, by society. You have to own. You're a complete person if you own where you live. You're a bit of a loser if you rent. So there's a few of these misconceptions that need to be kind of cleared out. Other ones like you just referenced, I'm going to put it off till next year. I'm going to put it off till next year. I wrote an article whereby I showed if a 22-year-old wants to have $1 million in their account on their 65th birthday, how much do they have to put away a month to get there? And the answer was, I can't remember exactly, like $300 or something. But if you start that process at 40, it's like 2,000 or something like that. So you're making things easier for yourself by starting earlier. So that's really what I want to get across to them.
And I think one thing I loved is the example of the house. A lot of people I talk to, they graduate, they get the funds to buy a house, and they go, oh, I'm getting this property. And they go, at some point, I'm going to move. And the joke I always make is your first home becomes your forever home. Because especially if you buy it when you get married and it is a house, you're like, oh, we're going to move up. This is just right now what we could afford. And you're like, okay, let's grab it because of the price range, right? And then like even down the street, there's a little bit nicer houses. We can eventually move there, whatever it might be. If you don't start I personally have put money away over time so that when that comes, I have the ability to go, what do I really want? Because I've seen so many people go, this is just my first home. We're going to move.
I know.
5 years go by, a kid comes, you're now in life, and that house you thought was going to be your first home becomes your forever home. So go in when you start thinking about houses and properties in general, instead of, like you said, rushing in it just to become a homeowner and to get out of a lease. Think about what you're really going to be using that property for. What, I always joke, I go, the house I buy will have a pool in it. And some people go, well, pools don't help you in resale. In the resale environment, when you try to sell that property, sometimes that hurts you. And I go, I'm not looking at a house of how quickly can I then resell it. I'm looking at a house at what brings me joy? What are the things I want to be doing with my time in that house? Because inadvertently, no matter your situation, you spend a lot of time in your home. So what are the things I might want? And then I look for that. And over time, when you're looking for it, you'll be able to find what fits your budget. What are the things you might be able to redo? It's also the concept I see a lot of like, oh, there's the fixer upper list of things we have to get done. And how often, let's all be honest here. You move into a house, you move into any property, and you're like, oh, here's the list. We're going to redo, we're going to pull out the cabinets, we're going to get new appliances. 3 months go by, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you're like, oh, I haven't done it. Whether you don't have the actual funds to do it or you just haven't had the time, it's really important to, when you're looking at any kind of investment, especially long term, to really go into the process of, okay, if this becomes my forever home, what will that look like? Will I be happy for it? Because inadvertently, a lot of times, especially with property, people go into it with the idea of it's the temporary solution to the long term problem. And that temporary solution becomes the long term solution.
Exactly right. I love hearing that stuff from you, Olivia. One of the big advantage of owning a home over renting a home is that you can rip out the cabinets and you can repaint it and you can put a room on, you can do this and that. This concept of a starter home is such BS. Don't buy a home that is not going to be suitable for the way your life is likely to look in 6 or 7 years' time. Even the structure of mortgages is such that all you're doing for the first 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 years is you're paying off interest. You're not even reducing the amount you owe. So, you might buy a place, get a mortgage, sell it 6 years later, and then look at how much you owe the mortgage company. It's almost exactly the same as what you started out with. All you've been doing for 6 years is paying down mortgage. So it makes no sense to plus, closing costs. Jumping around from place to place makes no sense. If you're going to move into it, make sure that it suits what your life is likely to be in. I would say 10 years. So don't fall for this starter home rubbish. And as you said, once you're in there for 10 years, then you can really make it your own. Have a pool if that's what makes you happy. A home is not an investment in the way that some Apple stock is. First of all, it costs you money every year instead of paying you money every year. And secondly, as I say, the return on real estate is not great. Don't treat it as an investment. Treat it as a place to make memories in for the next 10 years.
And I love that. Treat it as a place to make memories, because that's what you're doing. Every moment of your life, you're making a memory. So how do you want to spend that time? Do you want to be stressing about your finances? Do you want to be able to have the conversations and know you've certain things in place for your long term? What is something else that young professionals within financial planning should be thinking about to help them grow?
I think when I'm working with clients, I think the first thing we need to do, this is all about like putting your own mask on the plane before helping anyone else. I think before growth should be protection. And let's just make sure that everything's okay. What happens if the worst happens? And it's my job to think of the worst things happening: job loss, illness, disability, death, even. Let's just make sure before we make elaborate plans about growth, let's just make sure you're covered for all that stuff. If there are children involved, certainly if there are children involved, that means we need an estate plan. If you and your spouse are killed in a car crash, what happens to that kid? You don't want that decision left up to a judge in a court. You want to map out exactly what happens, exactly how that child's life is going to be funded, et cetera, et cetera. So usually the first thing I'll do is try and find some nasty circumstances that these people are exposed to and try and plug those gaps. Then we can move on to growth. So, again, estate planning is something that people sort of tend to start thinking about when they're 50, right? But no, you should, if you have children, it's non-negotiable. You have to have a guardianship plan in place. Plus, what's going to happen to your assets? You have an estate plan. Even if you don't have an estate plan, it's just that if you don't write it yourself, the state has written it for you. So let's get those things sorted out. I'm not a huge proponent of life insurance in most cases. I think I think a lot of people are overinsured, but in certain circumstances, particularly when it revolves around children, let's make sure that if something does happen, there are funds available. So I tend to start on the negative end of things before we get to sort of all the sexy stuff later on.
Well, I love how you brought up the idea of the protection. You brought up an amazing point with estate planning. Whether you're single and living on your own or you're married and have your first kid, whether you plan it yourself or, like you said, the state plans it for you. If something happens, there is a plan of how it's going to be dispersed. When you do your estate planning for yourself, and the earlier you start, and again, let me say this, just because you write it and it's 2023 and you create your estate plan for what it would look like at this moment in time, that does not mean, and let me reiterate, that does not mean that in 5 years from now, in a year, 6 months, that plan cannot be altered. I went through this personally with one of my grandparents. My grandparents wrote their estate plan before I was even born. And some of it went and how their plan got made. And then obviously there were more grandchildren introduced, different situations. Some of the things written in their will were about colleges and college. We were all like, by the time my grandmother passed away, the youngest grandchild was just in college. So everyone else had already left college. And she'd realized that she needed to update it. She just never got to it before she fell ill and sadly quickly passed away. And I was super close to her, and I was like, I knew there was then going to be headaches. Like I saw the writing, and sadly, a lot of people think that once it's made, it gets put out of mind. You don't have to change it.
Yeah.
It's made, and then you totally forget about it. And then when it occurs, it can be a totally different situation. So I always say the earlier you write it, it can always be changed. There can be different versions. But the sooner you do that, then you have a voice in what happens
Exactly. Right.
in the worst case scenario. I have a friend, for example, who just recently went through a divorce. And as soon as that divorce was finalized, he went to his estate planner and they changed up his estate plan because he has a daughter. And if something happened, he wanted to make sure where that went, how she was going to be taken care of in this new situation. So I think a lot of times we also forget that is like life, estate planning can always shift and change. And change what it looks like. And no one has ever set a rule on how many times you can change your state. So start it early, and then you, at least in case something happens, you have a voice.
It's a living, breathing document, right? And you can change it every year if you want. And the fact is, of course, as you just alluded to, names that appear in your documents, people pass away, people's relationships change. So yeah, you can always change it. And the other thing, of course, these estate documents are not just about the disposition of assets. There's healthcare. There's healthcare considerations, advanced medical directives. What happens if you're incapacitated? Who makes the decisions? What are those decisions? So those things are also addressed in a full set of estate documents as well. But yeah, I'm really glad you gave that little monologue there. It's very important.
And you brought up a good point. Estate documents aren't just about your assets. There's the point of, who do you want making the decision if something happens to make your medical choices? Who will have your best interest, or what will they know what to do, or what you wouldn't want? And those conversations, whether they're in a written document or not, can be sometimes difficult to have.
Mhm.
But wouldn't you rather, again, going back to the idea of your voice, wouldn't you rather have your voice heard and acknowledged, and people know what would happen in that situation, than that situation happening and no one knows what you would want or what the path forward could be? Because on either end of it, too, for your family, for your friends, that situation can be so overwhelming as well that it can be hard to make decisions. So you're helping them out as well and saying, this is really what I
Oh,
want.
absolutely. You don't care. You're dead, right? But you're doing this for them. You're doing this for the people who come after you and have to make these decisions. Where are your bank accounts? Where's your money? I mean, people don't actually know where their parents' money lies or anything like that. So preparing documents, here's the account number, here's where it is, here's roughly how much is in there. Here's the phone number for the bank. I mean, I will work with people on getting a document like that put together. And again, that's a living, breathing document, because you open an account, you close an account, this, that, and the other. So it's out of respect and consideration for the family members who come after you that you do this. This is not something you do for yourself.
And that actually brought up another great example I have of, I sit on a board. I'm a president of ASCM, which is the Association of Supply Chain Management for the state of Connecticut. And our financial person actually ended up having cancer and getting really sick more quickly, and ended up going into the hospital. And when he went into the hospital, I, of course, wanted to make sure he was doing the best he could, what the situation was, how can I help? But as a leader in the organization, my hat also had to go to, how are we paying our bills? What are the accounts? What needs to be owed? Where does that money go? I'm going, who's taking care of this? And what is our system built into place? Again, I was not the person who created this organization. So this organization had been going for a very long time. But what was the process put into place for other people to take on a role, whether it was his role or a different role, if something happened to someone? And it was a situation where that was really the first time any of these individuals really had to have that conversation. Okay, if I become, as the president of the organization, if I become unavailable for some reason, whether, I'm out of the country and unreachable, whether something happens to me, what do I want to be done? How should we be doing it? And how are the ways you can reach out? And in that specific situation, he was the only person that can make as they call it in banking, the key executors. He was the only key executor on the account. So what I learned in that point was, even key executors, if there's not a more than one, yeah, I can, as someone who is on the account, I can put money in, I can take money out. But if I want to shut down an account, make a drastic withdrawal, and each bank is a little different, I don't have the authority. So then, sadly enough, by the time we were trying to figure all this out, a lot of banks are like, we want the person here in person. And you're like, well, that person's in the hospital, bed. That person can't get up. And then there's a lot of hoops you have to go through. And it ended up taking us a year. And even after that person sadly passed away, to get an additional person as a key executor. And the banks were always like, well, where is that person? We need a driver's license. Oh, now they've passed away. We need death certificates. We need signage of their trustee. We need this. And so a lot of it is just even thinking about in a worst case scenario, even in accounts like this where it's more of a business, does someone have access? Does someone know, like you said, where the money is, what bank it's set up in, all of your accounts? The idea of, do they know when you pay your mortgage bill, where you pay your mortgage bill to, things like that, of just needing to know what to take care of, and putting that plan into place. So yes, I think
and it's even more complex now than it used to be, because obviously a lot of this stuff is digital. So you're getting statements through your Gmail account. Well, who knows the password, Judge? No one. And at the extreme end, can you imagine crypto? I mean, for goodness sake, that inheriting crypto just doesn't get done. It's in a digital wallet somewhere. The person who knows the password is dead. So yeah, there's a lot. And to your earlier question, this is one of the things that I do talk to people about. It does seem strange to talk to a 25-year-old who feels invincible about estate planning, but we need to have that conversation. And there are ways around it where you don't have to get a full will if you're just a single person living in rented properties. There are ways to get the healthcare directives and everything dealt with without necessarily jumping right into a will. But if you get to a situation where you own a property and have kids, it's absolutely non-negotiable. You need to have that.
Simon, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
So the website is probably the best place. That's angliaadvisors.com, advisors plural with an O, ANGLIA. I do have an Instagram account that can follow at Anglia Advisors, but it's really just pointing out articles that I've written. I do send out a weekly financial market report, which anybody's welcome to sign up for. You can do that at the website. So really, everything sort of revolves around the website. All my pricing is up there. It's a very, very open situation there. You can see everything about me and the firm.
Well, thank you, Simon, for all of your insight today.
I really enjoyed being on it, and thanks for asking me.
A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation are IRAs are a bucket of money you can start to put into to help you down the line. It isn't just about your 401k. There are other options and things you have access to. So look into things like IRAs, Roth IRAs, not just think that by putting money into your 401k, that is the only thing you can do to set up yourself for success in the long term financially, as well as time is the greatest weapon you have in financial planning. Sometimes, especially financially and planning, can be a daunting task. It can be something that money can be hard conversations, but once you get comfortable in it and the earlier you do it, the less stressful it becomes. You want to be doing it because you'll see the benefits in it. So time, in this case, is your biggest asset and your biggest weapon. And having that knowledge and having the time go hand in hand in you being able to create the long life that you want and have it set up properly, as well as look at homes as you would want to be there for 10 years. That was a great point Simon made of, especially with mortgages. I didn't even think of that aspect that Simon had brought up. Mortgages are really set up for you to be in a location for long term. So when you are looking at your homes, don't think of it as the starter home. Think about it as that 10-year, investment into your life, how you want to be living, the environment you want to be living in, things like that, as well as view growth as a protection. There should be, when you're growing, be you need to first look at your protection and what you're doing to protect yourself before you look at growth strategy and how you can grow financially. Make sure you're protected. Make sure those things are set up so that when you are ready to grow, all the bases are already covered. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Simon Brady. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.